Greetings all, and welcome to Wisdom from the Pali Suttas. Today we're going to begin a short series looking into what the Buddha has to say regarding Nirvana. Now, at the outset, and I should always say this, and this should always be kept in mind, we do not have to accept the Buddha's teachings as true, but we can take them seriously. And then we can see what happens if we take them seriously and try to put them into practice. So all of these teachings are going to come from the Udana. Now the Udana is one of the kind of books, if you want to call it that way, one of the collections found in the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is the fifth collection of the division of the Pali Canon, the division known as the Suttas. Just to give a little context here, in the Udana, which means something like an exclamation, there's usually kind of a prose passage. It could be a short story, a long story, some sort of teaching, and at the end of which the Buddha sort of gives an Udana, an exclamation, which kind of summarizes or amplifies some point in the main body of the teaching. So just a little more context, and we will be underway here. This is from the first chapter, the chapter on enlightenment, and this is the 10th sutta, the Bāhiya sutta. Now, Bāhiya was a spiritual seeker who went to the Buddha, traveled a very long distance without stopping because he had heard the Buddha had kind of a teaching that would deliver people, that would liberate us. And the Buddha gave him this teaching, and it did wake Bāhiya up. And Bāhiya was shortly afterwards killed by a cow. And the Buddha told the other monks, he said, make a stupa for Bāhiya. Your companion in the holy life has died. And so they did that, and they said, well, what is his ultimate destination? And so the Buddha tells us that when you reach this certain level of enlightenment, you will be able to know your past lives, and you'll also be able to know the future lives of other beings. And he said Bāhiya has reached Nirvana. So then that's the context for this little exclamation here. And we'll just read through it and talk about some of the points here. So, and I should say, this is my own translation. You can search the Udana online. There's John Ireland and Thanissaro Bhikku. I can put links to those in the description. It's always good to check several translations. Here we'll talk about the meanings, but when we're translating and we're having to settle on a word, a single word, usually words have a range of meanings that one word in translation isn't going to capture. So that's why it is a good idea to check others. So, where water and earth, fire, air cannot set foot, there the stars do not emit light, the sun does not radiate forth, there the moon does not shine, there darkness is not known. When a brahmin, a sage, by his own sagacity has known this for himself, then he is free from the form and formless realms, is free from happiness and sorrow. Certainly, I would invite you, dear listener, to kind of reflect upon the Buddha's words. I am going to offer up some of what I've uncovered here, but always that's to be taken with a grain of salt, and I sincerely would like to hear from you and hear what you have uncovered on your journey. So the first thing that we have to talk about and notice is this idea of the four ancient elements. And we often put them in the order earth, air, fire, and water. And they might even be in that order in Pali, but this is, I didn't mention it, this Udana was made in verse. So certain metrical constraints are upon one who recites in verse. And so word placement can change. That is poetic license. The main thing here is we don't want to regard water, earth, fire, and air as equivalent to our modern conception of elements. It's better to think of them like this, as earth equals, if I can find the equal sign, solid matter. Water, you can imagine, is the liquid state of matter. Air is kind of a gaseous state of matter. And then fire would be something like heat, or we might even think of it as energy. So the point here is that when we're talking about the four elements, we're talking about all of material reality. We're talking about matter in whatever form it takes, and we're talking about energy that kind of brings it, or that kind of manipulates it maybe, and that may not be the best word. So that's one thing to think about. So another way to kind of summarize this part is that where physical reality as we know it cannot set foot. Now, sometimes you'll hear this translated here, this gādhati, as cannot find a footing, cannot step, or something like that. I like the idea of cannot set foot because when you think about if we cannot set foot somewhere, it's either because we're not supposed to, like legally, or we just physically can't. Like we cannot really set foot on the surface of the sun. And I think that's the idea that's mentioned, or that's being, that's the idea that's sort of being called to mind here, that this is a realm, so to speak, where physical reality just cannot enter. It cannot sort of root itself. It cannot step into this this realm, this place, which is not a place. And then we have this kind of this really interesting section here where the stars and the sun and the moon don't shine. These are all different words for shine. The one here for the stars, jotanti, in Sanskrit, I think we get the name Jyoti. I've heard people called Jyoti. So, dear listener, let me know if that is, if my memory is faulty or not. So, basically, there's no light in this realm. But, there's no but here, but we can add a but. But, darkness is not known either. So, another way to think about this is we've transcended physical reality and we've transcended duality. I mean, this is one way to talk about transcending duality. So you might think, oh, no light, it's dark. No, it's not dark either. So this is something that our minds just cannot actually conceive of. And you can see where Zen sort of picks up this kind of seed in koans and really runs with it. Now, this point is not made. The Buddha never makes any kind of philosophical point from a disinterested point of view, like we're going to theorize about how reality is structured or something like that. He makes this point because it's going to benefit us somehow. And he tells us that here. When a brahmin, but a brahmin was one of the castes of ancient India, and you could think of, well, they're hereditary priests. They were ones who kind of sought union with Brahma, the divine, the highest God. Now, the Buddha does not use the word Brahmin in that way, and he goes to great lengths, like in the Dhammapada, to talk about how a true Brahmin has nothing to do with your birth or the way you look, but it's someone who's actually a real spiritual seeker. He amplifies that. It says a sage, muni. And then, by his own sagacity, I just like that word because it's connected in the Pali, muni, monena. Those are connected words with sage and sagacity. Has known this for himself. So, known what was just talked about here before. Now, I will just add one little thing here. There's a little play on words. I think this word for self is attang in Pali. In Sanskrit, it would be atman. And if you are familiar with Vedanta, you will know that atman is not only the word for self, but sometimes in English it's capitalized, a capital S self, and the immanent sort of transcendent reality. So you wonder if the Buddha is sort of playing on this, like, this isn't the exact form you would want, but it's almost like when one has known the Atman. So I leave that there for you, dear listener. This is poetry. And there are many levels to, there's not just one meaning here, obviously. So when a seeker, when someone on the path has known this here, then he is free from the form and formless realms. Now, these are the two main divisions of how all of reality was thought of by the Buddha, that there is, there are these infinite number of heavenly realms, probably an infinite number of hellish realms. There's an animal realm, a ghost realm. Technically, you can divide rupa into the kama, which is really where we are, like the Kama Sutra, the realm of desire. But again, when this is known, then that person is free from any realm. So now it's not specifically stated as nirvana, but we know from context that nirvana is beyond, if you want to think of it that way. We're imposing a concept here that's not in this. But we're free from all of that. And probably another way to think about it is that we're free from, I can't type, from rebirth in any of those realms. Now, I know there are people who don't subscribe to that belief. That could even be during your own life. I mean, how many different lives does one person lead? You're free from transmigration. In one life, maybe that would be a way of saying you're finding more stability, or that if you do believe that your consciousness could end up in some other form, that's not going to happen in this case. And so you're free from that, and then you're free from happiness and sorrow. Again, a way of going beyond duality. You could think of this as free from pain or from pleasure and pain. It's another duality. This is sukkā and dukkha. Dukkha is, mainly what the Buddha talks about in the Four Noble Truths. So anyway, that's where I'm going to leave this today, dear listener. As always, I am very interested in what you have to say regarding this. And next up, the Buddha is going to go into more detail about how nirvana is neither spatial nor temporal. Peace.